Go ahead, Fortune.
Okay. Okay, so Roger, I'm reading out the questions that have been submitted.
Okay, before we start the questions, let's just welcome everybody to the call. Hi, Ola, Folarami, Michael, Precious, Adobe, Adoragbemi, Mamu Yowi, Alan, Bridget, Fortune, Godwin, Comfort, Toby, and Tolu Lope. Welcome to our group mentorship sessions. So these sessions are sessions that are organized by the product community to help people, answer questions that are product related. And while we're on this call, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or you can raise your hand to ask. But before now, we already have questions that were sent during the day. We have about 4 questions, and we're going to take those questions. Fortune is going to be reading them out one by one, and Roger is going to be answering the questions. So if you sent us a question in today, Roger will be answering those questions now. We have Roger with us today. Thank you, Roger, for joining and for always being available to us to answer our questions. So yeah, we can start. Fortune, you can read out the questions now.
Sorry, before Fortune starts, let me just say, Roger, we love you.
Yeah, I love you guys too. Always happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so the first question is from Philip. Okay, so he says, I'm assuming you joined a team that uses Excel sheets to track delivery. How would you manage and introduce delivery tracking tools like Jira, etc.? Roger, did you get that?
I did. I don't know the short answer. So you're currently using Excel to track it, and you want to move to a delivery tracking tool. So firstly, it's less about the specific tool that you use and more about what you're trying to achieve. So if you're wanting to change the tool, any tool that a team is using and you're wanting to switch to another one, if you're using Trello and you want to move to Asana, or if you're using Excel and want to switch to Jira, what you need to do is try and make the switch as easy as possible for them, to make it as common, like try and set it up in the way that they used to be working, but then show them all the benefits of the new tool. So a tool like Jira is a totally different flow to anything they've been doing in Excel. So if you think about Excel, it's all going to be a list with status updates of like a due date, some details, and then status. But it's very difficult to focus on certain things at the right time, to know what anybody is working on at any point of time, because it's just a flat list. So the big shift that you're going to need to communicate to your team is, or help them see the value of, is being able to use swim lanes or columns that you can track the status of things by visually looking at the board. You know what's in progress and who's currently working on it and what's been done and what's ready for testing. You can visually see that quite easily, and you can kind of segment and break down certain things in a lot easier way than applying filters to an Excel spreadsheet. Because the Excel spreadsheet, that other problem you're going to have is all the information is completely flat. So everything you want to enter is in a cell, in a horizontal cell. Whereas when you look at it on a task tracking tool, it's going to be tags. It's going to be, when you open up, you'll see the number of comments, you'll see the number of merge requests. You can see those sort of things. But a team's always going to struggle to move to a new tool if there's no real benefit of switching to that new tool. So it's less about, every team has to be on Jira, or every team has to be on stuffing. Like, those tools will help give you something that another tool won't. And what you need to try and identify is, what is that benefit of switching to that tool? What can we do now that we couldn't do before? Whether it's ease of use, or visually seeing what's going on in a cleaner way, or integrations into merge requests or other like tech platforms, being able to see branches or create better subtasks, like whatever that is. Maybe it's being able to roll up epics as sort of major tasks, and then creating subtasks that spin off onto a separate delivery board. But thinking about those sorts of things, it's always going to be a big jump for a team to move to a new tool. But you need to make as much as common as possible while still showing them the benefits of this new tool. You should never just move to a new tool for the sake of just moving to a new tool. You should always move because you're wanting to get some kind of benefit, or you're wanting to achieve something that you couldn't do in the old tool. And so identifying what that gap is really key in order to onboard a team and motivate and help them see the value of why a new tool works. But I'm a big advocate for not just following Scrum, or not just following Kanban, or not just using Jira because that's what everyone does. You must use it because it makes sense for your team, or because it delivers more value for your team than the current tools. And in order to do that, you need to understand what value will it deliver that my current tools don't. Does that answer your call? Sorry, I forget who answered that question, but are they, Philip, I think it was you. Does that answer your question?
Philip, can you hear us? Just, if you can't speak, you can just react.
Yes, it does. Okay, cool. Yeah, but don't just use a tool for the sake of using a tool. It's like, otherwise everyone's just going to get pissed off and frustrated, because it's always going to be different and people don't like change. So if there's no benefit to moving, don't move. I've run some really amazing projects off Trello and it works just fine. You don't need the fancy tools. It can help in certain cases with certain teams, but you don't need it. Don't use a tool for the sake of a tool.
Okay. All right. So Aduragbemi asks, if you are given an idea by prospective clients to make research as a product manager to find out whether the problem can be solved and idea brought to life, what are the steps to take in terms of documentations and research? I mean, is it PRD first or user research, etc., to show and prove to the clients that the idea is good or not? So I think it's asking for the process of a feasibility study. Roger?
Yeah, so if it's a completely new product, it's slightly different to adding a feature or expanding on an existing product. But once again, I'm gonna deviate slightly here. Like, forget about the tool, whether it's a PRD or a feasibility study or a write-up or a white paper or custom interviews. Forget about the tools. Think about what is it that you need to be able to show in order to sell a new idea. And so what you need to do is you need to show, firstly, so when we look at it, the first couple of levers that we pull in our traction engine of helping build and develop new ideas or new products, we look at the first step is a customer value lever. So how can you quantify what the value of what the value of the problem is to the potential customer? So focusing purely on the customer, and whether that's feasibility study, whether that's customer discovery interviews, whether that's creating case studies of what they're currently doing and why it sucks. Like, there's plenty of ways of doing that. But what you need to do is you need to gather data on how big a problem it is and how much of a priority a problem that is for a particular customer. So you need to identify which customer segments it is. You need to chat to a bunch of them and find out what is the exact problem that they're actually having. How do you understand it? How do you get as close as you can to that current problem? And specifically, how are they already trying to solve it? If they're not trying to solve the problem in some way already, it's probably not a serious enough problem for them on their list of priorities. If they're not already paying for a much more expensive solution or trying to hack it through some other solution or do it manually or do it in Excel, like, is it really a big enough problem? And so that's what you need to work out first, of how much money does it cost them that they don't solve the problem? Like, what are the case studies, and get data and validation that works? Whether you wrap that up into a feasibility study or a PRD or whatever, I don't care. Use the tool that makes the most sense for what you need to deliver on. But the first step is to validate and quantify the size of the problem. The next is to start testing and iterating potential solutions that might be to that problem. So depending on where the situation, if you're validating a new business idea, you definitely need to run here. If you're just need enough evidence to unlock a little bit of budget to go and test for a solution, then just focusing on the problem is big enough to say, hey, here's a really big problem adjacent to the product that we currently already offer, or that is one worth solving. Let's take a little bit of budget and time to try and find a solution there. And then you move into a solution as rapid prototyping or solution prototyping mode. And there, what you're looking to do is you want to identify the value that you need to deliver to a very particular customer segment. You should have that already. And then you're wanting to iterate through multiple different ways that you could solve that problem. And it's not building an app. It's it's identifying how can we deliver that value without building anything, without building tech. How do we understand what a solution would need to be in order to deliver that? And so many times, if it's an app, and this is where the, sort of some prototyping tools like a Wizard of Oz or a Concierge MVP comes in, where you have a landing page where somebody fills out a form, and then that form actually goes to a human, and the human connects whoever it needs to connect and does the matching, and then sends them an official looking email back saying, we've matched you with this partner, or here's the pricing, or whatever the service is trying to offer. So actually paying interns or having people deliver the service and deliver the software as a service, but actually having people deliver the service in the back end on a software front end is a really cheap way to test and iterate and try multiple different ways of solving the problem. You can adjust pricing really quickly to gauge how big a problem it is. And so regardless of what type of solution you need to run or solutioning you need to test, you generally want to test 3 or 4 different hypotheses or prototypes or click-through prototypes, or create wireframes and do customer interviews, do quantitative surveys of like, hey, or create a landing page and sell some Facebook or Google ads to see if you can get people to sign up for a wait list. All of those things are proxies to show that the solution that you're testing is something that people want. And so the first step is to understand the size of the problem and the need of this particular people. The second is to test how might we solve this, and to effectively get a spec of what your core product would need to be if you need to ship that. And then what I would normally do is bundle those into some kind of report or write-up with the evidence and the customer validation, the MOUs, the whatever it is, or the wait lists of people who've signed up and shown interest, the conversion rates of click-through of ads, like any of that could be data to justify why this is something worth building. And so once you've got that, you can then go into a build cycle and ship the core value of what you're trying to build for a customer. But so forget about, pick the tool or the style of write-up, whether it's a PRD or study or a document. That matters far less than being able to very clearly articulate customer segment, the problems, show clear evidence and understanding of how many people, how big is the market, like what do people actually experience when they're doing that? How much might that be worth if you're solving it? How much money are they currently losing? And then evidence to show we tested these 5 solutions and this one got a clear uptake of this was the right way to solve the problem for this particular customer segment. With these 2 sets of evidence, we propose building this solution, and then you've scoped out what you need to build. And then that's kind of where you're pitching for budget or time or engineering time in order to actually build and ship the core product value. So yeah, regardless of the type of way in which you communicate that information, those are kind of the pieces of data and the evidence that you need to have in order to convince business to give you budget or time or engineering to actually focus on doing it as a priority.
All right. I do agree. Bim, does that answer your question? You could just react to in the chat.
Cool.
All right.
I did actually write an article on this called "Customers Can't Innovate for You," which is looking at like how do you gather data and what do you do with customer feedback. If a customer says, "Hey, we should build this," like, should you actually add that to your backlog? And if not, why not? And what do you think about that? So I've just dropped it in the chat here. It's around how to incorporate customer feedback or customer suggestions into your road mapping. So that might be useful.
Okay, let's take this. Benny, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, good evening. I do have a question.
Hi.
Hello, Roger. Good evening. Thank you. It's nice to meet all of you. I'm actually a new member, and I joined yesterday. I currently work as a product designer, but I'm looking to transition into product management. And within the next 6 months, that's the timeline I've given myself to realistically get a role as an associate product manager. So I'd like to ask you this question. The question is, what should I be focusing on, that will get me closer to my goal? Because what I've learned in product design, what I know now as a product designer is different from the way that I navigated it as a beginner. So I'm trying to learn from the lens of someone who's been there for years. What should I pay attention to, and what's the best course or way to, walk around getting to my goal within the next 6 months and being a really good product manager?
Great. So there are many flavors of product manager. I definitely don't think you would need to start at an associate level again. I think there's a lot of, if you have a couple of years under your belt as a product designer, there's a lot that will carry over. So if you think of everything that you do that isn't done in Figma, that is exactly the same as what a product manager would do. So things like custom interviews, things like understanding use cases, user journeys, user flows, that's all quite a big overlap with what a product manager would do. The things that the product manager will do that are slightly beyond that is looking at running technical teams or creating user stories or managing backlogs. Like quite often that's something that you'd pick up of running that. And the second piece, so that's, if you think of product as the intersection of three spheres. It's the customer value, it's the business value of business strategy, and the technical implementation or technical constraints. And product management lives at the intersection of those three. So where you've been right now is between the customer value and designing what the technical team needs to build. So there's definitely a bit more over and above that, like user stories and actually QA and sort of making sure that what gets built actually does deliver on that customer value. But the biggest area where I would focus on growing is thinking more around that business strategy component. And the best product designers already do a bit of this. So I'm not sure which flavor you're in or if your environment allows that. But thinking about like not only how do we make products useful and how do we technically do that, but how do we actually do that in line that actually executes the business strategy? And so thinking more around business strategy, like which product might you need to solve? Even as a product designer, you can start thinking about it. This product that we need to build, what is the business value that we need to control? Or how does designing this product tie into our roadmap, which helps deliver our company strategy? And so does it need to be full-featured bells and whistles, or is it just a small part that needs to be quick and slick and get customers through and out as quickly as possible? Or do we need to make it as useful and beautiful and functional as possible? So there's always a bit of a trade-off there between the perfect design and what is fit for purpose, a product that's fit for purpose for the business strategy at the point that you're at, for where you're at right now. And so that business strategy of understanding how the products you're designing delivers business value, as well as that intersection of the technical stuff of actually how long would it take to build this thing that I'm designing? And if I design it in a different way, can I make it faster to build? Or are there certain features that don't add that much value to the customer, don't add much business value, but make it way easier to build? And thinking more about those kinds of compromises is going to bring you more in towards the center, the intersection of those three spheres, instead of sort of sitting more on the customer value side. So it's customer value, business value, and technical constraints, or technical team and product and all the actual code that you have. And so you're currently sitting between the two spheres. I would definitely start being more intentional about thinking on the business aspect, as well as thinking about the operational coordination role around actually managing and shipping software and managing the cadence of the dev teams. So depending on the different PMs will sit slightly differently in those intersections. Some are just managing dev teams, some are just doing strategy and road mapping and some are just doing customer interviews and research and identifying what value we might want to create next. So depending on the role that you look for, there will be overlaps, but I'm pretty confident that if you're currently doing product design and not just UI and UX design, if you're actually thinking about product design, the difference there is including those other two spheres, which you should be doing to an extent already. So just lean more into that. And as you start picking up those skills, you should be able to transition into product relatively easily.
Thank you so much for that detailed answer. Thank you. You really answered my question. I think the last bit would be if there are any resources or courses you could point me to it. It would be really helpful.
I normally don't recommend courses just because I've never done any, so it's hard for me to say. There are a bunch on Udemy. Like most product courses are going to give you the basic language and terminology and the toolkit that you need. But it's the same with product design. Like you can do a Figma course, but that doesn't make you a product designer. And so you can do those courses to understand like what are the tools and what is the language and what are the processes, but only by actually trying to do that. And doing that from where you're currently at. As a product designer, chat to the developers saying, hey, I've got these 2 potential designs, which one would be easier to build? And then how do you include technical constraints into your design? Or making sure that what you're building, what you're designing, how does that add business value? What is the revenue it's going to make? How significant is it compared to other products in the staple? And how do you best like upsell or create the product in such a way that it's going to generate more revenue or generate more upside for that? Because the more you start thinking about that, before you know it, you'll be a pretty well-rounded product manager.
All right, thank you. So get down and dirty. Thank you. I'll take that advice. Thanks.
Okay. So let me take the questions that have been submitted earlier. Okay. So Ijema asks, as a student still learning product management, what areas of product management can I focus on to better equip myself to stand out to employers when looking for work? And she also asks, there's a follow-up question. She says, what qualities and attributes must I possess to look attractive to employers without having variable work experience?
Cool.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I did. There are 2 questions in there. The first one is, how do you stand out as an entry-level product manager? This comes up quite a lot. My standard answer is product management is a very broad thing, and there are a lot of areas that it touches, from managing dev teams to operations to product design to product analytics to customer discovery to product strategy. Like there's a very wide range of what that looks like, and so wherever you are, find an area that you already have some kind of grounding in. So if you're coming out of customer success, lean into customer interviews and customer discovery and like build that as a superpower. Like the biggest thing when you're applying for for more junior product or associate level product management roles is everyone kind of has experience that just is a bit like meh, and it's hard to kind of have somebody stand out. But in reality, because of this broad stretch of product management, the situation that they're trying to hire you for will already have a bias. Are they trying to launch a new product? Do they just need someone to help provide more sort of admin and support to managing their dev teams? Do they need someone who's more analytical because that's what they're missing on the team? Like they're always going to be looking for a uniquely shaped person to fit into their team. And so my best advice to help people stand out is to not try and be a generalist when you're early on. Rather focus on doubling down on some kind of speciality, of becoming great at customer interviews. And that means doing a whole bunch of research, doing some case studies around how you do that. When you ask different questions, maybe publish an article or 2 specifically around that. Mercy can't hear me, but the little speech bubble is going. So if can everyone else hear me? Thumbs up.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, Mercy, can't help you. But the so in the beginning, like you want to think about like going really narrow and finding a way to stand out, because when they're looking for a junior product manager and they need someone with a bit more of a design flair, if that's where you're standing out, you're going to stand out compared to everyone else who's a bit more of a generalist. Or if they're needing someone who's a bit more analytical, it's quite a technical product. Or if they're needing someone who's more like better with running with dev teams, then doing a Scrum course or something leaning out on that will help a little more. But so like my best advice to young product managers is don't try and create a generic product management profile. Create one that is skewed towards one aspect of product management that you can get a toehold to get into the industry. When you get to a mid-level, you want to start going broad and understanding, being pretty well-rounded, because the product manager is generally a generalist role. Like that's normally what you need. So you need to move around in different types of product management roles. And then as you start getting towards the senior part of your career, sort of 5-6 years plus, then you want to start doubling down on a specific speciality in product management. You want to go into product ops, you want to go into innovation product management, or B2B enterprise integrations and product management in that space. So you kind of want to start specializing again. So I think of it like a Christmas tree. You want to start by going narrow. Then once you've got it to hold in 1 to 2 years experience, you then want to start going broad. And once you build it broad, as you start building towards 5-6 years experience, you want to start focusing in on some kind of unique niche or thing that makes you stand out. So that's typically my advice for people wanting to get in. How do you stand out? If you're looking at case studies or things, the best advice I've ever seen, I can't remember who it was, but it was actually in the People in Product group. But what they said was, instead of just doing a random case study, pick a company or a type of company that you think you want to work for, and then look at doing something for them. So do an analysis of their product and add a new feature, or do market research or a competitor analysis of racking up all the different features, and then send that to the company saying, hey, find the product manager or person who's running product or tech in that company and send them the report saying, hey, I wrote a report on competitor analysis in your space. In case you find this interesting, I'm looking for a PM job if you want to stand out. And the beauty of that is if they don't have a job right now, or they don't want to hire you, you've then got 5 or 6 other competitors that you can shop exactly the same report around to, and kind of like helping stand out by that. And in a worst case scenario, you've got a really great competitor analysis report that's good for your profile that you can start building bodies of knowledge. So even if you don't have work experience, there are ways of finding ways of delivering value to particular companies, and then and then seeing if you can use that as a way to stand out or get ahead of a leg up.
All right. Okay, so Tolu asks, how do I create a portfolio as an entry-level product manager with little or no experience?
Cool. Yeah. So that was to my last point of, like, find a company or an industry or something that you want to work for, and then do a case study or a piece of work for that company or for that industry. So map out their user journeys, interview a set of customers about a new product feature, do a competitor analysis, do market research, look at trends of do some trend analysis of Africa versus South America versus Southeast Asia for a particular product in a particular customer segment, like logistics and delivery, or like on-demand marketplaces, or like whatever that niche is, and try and do a case study that is valuable to somebody and use that as a way to try and get a job. And if you don't get it, at least you've got a valuable case study to add to your portfolio. So those are the types of activities or things that you can lean in on. And you're going to learn a ton by actually working with real data, with real world products, in how you're going to get there. So that would be my recommendation on how to build up a profile. Another thing is writing. As you're getting into it and doing research, like write an article on product market fit, or on North Star metrics, or on KPIs, how to identify KPIs that matter, or what most people get wrong about managing developer teams, or writing user stories, because that's going to force you to do a whole bunch of research, write a coherent article, get your thoughts in a logical argument of some facts, and you're learning through that whole process. But at the same time, you're creating something that you can share, that a future employer can go and look at and actually say, oh wow, this person's written some really interesting things. They're going to stand out. So that would be my advice. Fortune, you're on mute.
Okay, awesome. Can you hear me? There's a little.
Yes.
There's a bit of rain here. Can you hear me? There's a bit of rain here.
If your network is up.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
We can hear you.
I can. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so Latif asks, how do we tailor our past and current work experiences to match job descriptions of product management roles?
Yeah, there was an interesting article. I'll try and find it and share it in the questions channel or the learning resources channel, sorry, tomorrow. But there was an article written by a product manager, actually, who, what he did is he looked at the CV, looked through his CV and colors, like highlights certain words in certain phrases. So looking at, does every word start with a strong action? Like I created, or I launched, or I developed, not I participated in, or those sort of things. So like looking at clear actions. And then for every point on your CV, looking at, does it start with a strong action word? Does it have a couple of keywords of using, I did customer discovery interviews, or like sort of some jargon or language around that? And then does that, does each point have some kind of metrics or measurement of that increased, we interviewed 500 people and developed or validated a roadmap that we need to deliver, or we made these product changes that resulted in a 30% increase in conversion rate, or like some kind of numbers. And so every point on your CV should include those things: a strong action word, some kind of jargon or language around the activities that you actually did, and then a measurement or metric of what that actually resulted in. When you look at a particular job interview, you can look at the language that they're using and see how much of a match there is between the language on your CV and the language that they're actually using in that job. So look at if there are requirements to do customer interviews, or if they talk about customer discovery, or if they talk about customer interactions, change the phrases to whatever the phrases they are using. So use those the jargony words that you've thrown into each point. Make sure that wherever you have a version of that, you're using the version that they used in the job spec. And so that they're going to hear it and understand it in a better way. So that's like a high level advice. It's not possible to do for every job you apply for, because you're probably going to apply for way more than you'll ever think. So just one or two that are key or more interesting. Generally having a shorter, punchier CV. I find most people's CVs just way too long. Like I have a one-page CV that covers about 12 years worth of experience of building startups and products. And that's actually super short, super punchy, like very much to the point. And whenever somebody asks me a question about one point, I can talk about 10 minutes on just, oh, this was an experience we did, and here's extra layers, and here it becomes so rich a conversation. Whereas when there's a long CV covered with so much fluff, it's kind of like, oh, there's nothing really standing out in this candidate. And I find it just a lot watered down. So I can almost guarantee you, almost everyone should be able to shorten your CV quite significantly, and try and condense it to the most important critical words that really make the difference.
Okay. So Latifat also asks, can you hear me, Roger? Yeah. Okay, Latifat also asks, can you share some tips or tricks to getting remote or not international paid product management roles, especially for someone who is transitioning into product management from a non-technical background? Thank you.
The short answer is no, I can't. if I could answer that question succinctly, I think we'd all be a lot better off earning euros instead of nairas and rands. So I think there are a bunch of remote jobs. It's very difficult to try and position African experience, because they just don't recognize your experience. They don't recognize the companies. They don't recognize any of that. Whereas if you're in the US, if you're in New York, or if in London, like there's a good chance you've probably worked for Facebook at some point in your thing, or you worked for a startup that got bought by Facebook. Or there's ways of throwing in name brands and companies that everyone knows. Whereas where I'm from in South Africa, and specifically in Cape Town, like the big brands are like Old Mutual or Santam or Sanlam, or like those are the big companies that people work for here, and just globally, internationally, no one's going to recognize them. So I think it's very difficult to do that. I don't have a quick hack on how to do that, other than acknowledging what those differences are, and then trying to position your CV in a way that will try and accommodate some of those drawbacks and make it more understandable or more relatable to somebody who won't recognize any of the names on your CV. There are a couple of CV services out there as well. I used one a little while ago. I can't remember its name. It started with an R. It was reworded, where you upload your CV and it ran AI analysis on it, looking at it against a whole bunch of different job posts, and then threw that through. So ask that question in the questions or learning resources channel and tag me in it, and I'll answer it tomorrow. I'll go find the link.
Okay. So that's all the questions that were submitted earlier. I think Ulua Damilari is raising his hands. Hi, Ulua Damilari, would you like to ask a question? Ulua Damilari, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? So
Can.
Yes.
Hello, can you hear me also?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, my question goes to, okay, the thing is, I'm actually a product management enthusiast, like a newbie. I started it, I think around last year. That was late last year. I've taken courses. I'm actually a self-taught person. I took courses on my own. I read books. I did a podcast, a lot of things. But the thing is, I'm searching for an internship job all this while. But where I'm having concern is, I want to know, is there a stage you get in your learning that will guarantee you to be able to start searching for job? Like, is there a stage that will guarantee you to start searching for job, to start applying for jobs? Or you just know personally that I've gotten to the level where I can start searching for jobs? Or there's a stage where you get in the product management journey that will guarantee you to start searching for jobs? I don't know if you get the question.
Yeah, there's a lot of background noise, but I think I can hear it. You're asking if there's a stage that you reach when you need to start looking for a job, like when you're once you're doing courses or trying to get into it. The short answer is no. Some people get a associate level job or a product management job with zero experience or zero courses. Other people do all the courses and still can't find a job. So it's a luck of the draw. It's how you position yourself. It's how you interview. There's so many variables that there isn't a silver bullet, unfortunately, or there isn't a certain level that you need to get to that will guarantee you a job. I'm currently job hunting at the moment, and it's been 4 or 5 months and I haven't quite found exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm not in a rush, so it's a bit different, but at the same time, there's nowhere in your career, I think you get a point when jobs are guaranteed. It's always going to be a compromise or trying to find something that's a good fit for where you're at right now. I don't know, does that answer your question? Or does that cite successfully?
All right, thank you. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, I think Onu has a question. Hi, Onu, can you hear us? I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. Did I?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Roger, thanks for the insight so far. So my question is in 2 parts. As a PM, so most of what I do is mostly on the business side of things, which is defining what the business wants and leading the team, stories and workspace to deliver it. So, but I also get to have interviews with for technical PM roles, and I never seem to really fit in when they ask me, do you inspect the codes, do you test? And I don't even do any of that. So how do I be a more robust person, right? Getting in on the Scrum things, real tasks, and being a more encompassing a PM, a growth, and a technical person as well. So how do I sort of put my best foot forward, like to encompassing the richness of being a high flying PM, right?
Olu, how many years experience do you have?
I have 4.
4. Okay. So you're right at the middle of that Christmas tree that I described earlier. So in the beginning of your career, you want to go really narrow to help you stand out. And then as you start getting over 2 or 3 years experience. You want to start getting broad experience. And I think that's what you're trying to do for the next couple of years. And then as you get towards 5 or 6 years worth of experience, you probably want to start focusing in again. Does that, would you kind of agree you're in that middle section?
I don't get the question. I don't get your answer.
Okay. So in your product management career, typically when you start out, when you've got 1 to 2 years experience, you normally need to focus in order to actually get the job and actually be able to deliver on something. And as you start getting to the middle of your career, kind of where you're at now, so sort of 3 to 5 or 6 years, you want to start broadening out into other areas of product management. Is that the stage that you're in right now, that you've done the sort of business aspects and you want to reach out into other parts of it?
Yes, that's the stage I am right now, and I want to be more than the business person. I want to be that technical person. Well, I don't seem to really have guidance. So
are there currently developers where you work?
Yes, I have developers in this company.
Cool. So my best advice would be to start with what you've got where you're at. So looking at, like, currently in the areas you're working on will be more the business areas, but how can you start doing more tasks? Or if there are product managers that work more closely with developers, can you start shadowing them or observing them or helping them or taking off some of the load that they do and starting to experience other parts of the role? And if there aren't other product managers there, can you lean in with the developers to see, like, how can you help the developers with what they're doing? How do you help them? Like, how do they, even just observing how they're currently doing things can help a lot. So how do they currently run sprint planning meetings? What do their backlogs look like? How often do they have weekly sprints, or every 2 weeks do they have a sprint plan? And can you sit in on those sessions? Can you see how they do it? And as you start finding more overlap, you're going to start exposing yourself to that. When it comes to, like, understanding technical infrastructure or those sort of things, one of the best best ways I've found of having that conversation is finding a developer on the team that's relatively senior, but that you're on good terms with, and then asking them to, like, buy them a coffee or take them to lunch or whatever it is, and ask them to draw the software for you. What is the software stack? What are all the different services they use? How does it fit together? And starting to understand what are the bits, what are the different teams that we have, what areas of the app do they work on, can they draw it for you? And so can you start creating pictures and images of that? Like, if you're not a developer, or if you haven't started out as a developer, you're never going to review code or, like, manage merge requests, and to expect you, like, to be applying for a job to be able to do that, you're almost always going to fail. And that I think would be a bit too far of a stretch. But there are definitely more technical aspects, like running a Scrum process or Kanban, like the benefits or pros and cons of one or the other. How can you improve their way of work? How can you help them do QA reviews or retros at the end of the sprint? Do they run retros? If not, offer to run a retro for the sprint team, where you ask everyone 3 questions: what went well, what went bad, what could have been improved, and what ideas or what ideas do we have, or actions what we should do differently. And we have 4 simple columns that you run out. You can normally do them in 25, 30 minutes to reflect on, like, what can we improve about our way of work, and then going back and improving that way of work and suggesting to the different teams, or setting up better design briefings, if that's, like, what comes out of that. But getting closer to the developer teams is going to give you more of an understanding around the way they work. And so try and find ways to do that in your current company where you're currently at. If you can't, like, ask your manager, like, tell your manager, this is an area I want to grow in. Can we change some of my duties and move into those sort of areas in order to pick up those skills, because I think I can add some more value in that. If you can't do that, then you need to try and pick it up over and above your current workload, and seeing how you can manage that to add value on the more technical side of the business. The same with growth, or with analytics, or whichever other area you want to move to. Can you work closer with the marketing team? Can you, like, does your product currently have analytics? If not, advocate for why we need analytics. Get them to install Mixpanel or Amplitude. Do a bunch of video courses on how to set up proper reports, and start running real analytics about, hey, this feature that we shipped last week, how has that actually improved ROI? How is that adding business value? And so coming from the business point, reaching into how does the tech and how does what we're shipping in tech actually contribute to the business strategies and the road mapping and the things that I'm doing, and creating a tighter feedback loop there is going to help you get a better understanding of the issues and the pros and the cons of the ways of work that they have. Does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. Yes, sorry, the last question would be, so when you have your developer or your front end or your back end that's really slowing down the progress of the work and is unresponsive, what's in your experience, what's the best way to really push them to respond faster and follow up with deliverables as already stipulated on the roadmap? How do you really get to push your something?
Sure. So the one phrase that you said there is how do you push the dev team? And that I think is your problem. It's less about you pushing the dev team to deliver faster and more about you deeply understanding what actually stops them from being able to deliver faster. No developer wants to ship code slowly. Like they just don't. That's like not at all what they want there. But normally there's something in either there's too much, the code's really complex and there's too much legacy code, in which case motivate for the business to carve out some time to improve historical tech stacks. Or if there's if it's like, they're just not motivated or they don't see the relevance of how this feature that they're building, how that adds value, find a way of adding relevance, find ways of motivating them and pulling them towards wanting to ship faster and seeing value in shipping faster. What is the value in shipping faster? And how do you help them create more ownership over that value and that value creation? Because that's really what the software developers are doing. So it very rarely helps to just push more time, like shorten the deadlines and make them ship code faster, because like that's not really how people work. Like if they're not motivated, you need to motivate them, not force them to do it. And if there are other blockers like bad processes or slow CI/CD pipelines, or like go and chat to the developers, they'll have the answers. Like what's stopping you from shipping code in half the time? Like what do you spend most of your time doing that you think is the biggest waste of time? And the developers will give you lists of plenty of things for you to improve. And it's almost always process related and very rarely sometimes it's motivation related, but mostly it's process related. And it never helps to try and push them faster. It always helps to actually work on the real issues. Does that help?
All right. Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
Cool. Michael, we've got 5 minutes left. Should I jump to your question? Fortunately, are you happy with that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Michael asks in the Q&A, I work for a sponsor that is not tech inclined. He's just concerned about when we're going live. How do you manage such a person, even though you provide regular project updates? So the biggest problem with non-tech people and setting deadlines is it's the unknown unknowns, right? So that's the reason software projects are late, is because we're building these invisible castles in the sky, and knowing where the plumbing goes and where a wall goes or where something is all in people's heads. It's all imaginary, and it's just done in these abstract lines of code. And invariably, there's something we haven't catered for. And if you think about that analogy of building an invisible house or invisible castle in the sky, even in the real world, when everything is known and construction projects and architects can draw everything out, we know exactly where everything's going to be, houses still don't get built on time because of the unknown unknowns. Because even in reality, in normal construction, there are just things you can't cater for, and you've got to put buffers in order to help understand that. But somehow when it gets to software, people are like, oh no, but we did the spec, we've done the designs, it should just take this long to build. We've got a bunch of assumptions baked into our time frame, but we're not going to acknowledge that uncertainty. We're just going to say you have to commit to it and force you to hit this deadline, which is obviously just ridiculous when you think about it in that sense. And so one of the best ways that I've found of working with non-technical people is never committing to a single date, always committing to a date range. So if you say this project is going to take between 3 and 5 months to deliver, the first question that's the first question that's going to come in response to that is why. And it's like, and that's the right question, because now you're talking about, well, these are the uncertainties that we have. These are the things that could influence it. That, like, don't just say, oh, it's because software is always late, so we added 30%. But being able to answer that question with, well, there's specifically these API integrations that we've looked at the docs, and it looks easy, but when we tried to integrate with them, the docs weren't right. So we assume the docs are going to be wrong. And therefore, we've added an extra month for the integration because this is a key integration and it's probably going to go wrong out of the early tests we've done. That's the right conversation to be having with a non-technical person going, well, what are the things that could kill this project? Like the biggest problem with non-technical people is when you commit to a deadline and the deadline kind of comes and goes and it's like, well, where's the software? And it's like, oh no, we had all these other issues cropped up. And they're like, but why couldn't you know about those issues up front? It's like, because you haven't been clear about the uncertainty, or you haven't been clear about the assumptions that you've baked into that kind of deadline. So how do you make those assumptions, that uncertainty, how do you make embracing ambiguity part of your planning process? And so often just committing in a range is by far the easiest way of doing that, because then you start highlighting, and it means that you need to understand what areas are we most uncertain about, and actually talk to the developers, like what can go wrong in that. So that's the one hack that I found. I mean, even when I was running a dev studio and clients would pitch us and would like quote on projects, my quotes were always a date range. And then it becomes a conversation. We were working with startups. Well, it's like, well, I could get you out the minimum viable product. Like, what's more important to you? Like price? Like, do you want to get it out quick and dirty? Or do you want to get it out with all the bells and whistles and full featured and make sure it's perfect? Because if that's right, then you need to pick the upper bound. But if you actually just want to get something out and just see if it's worthwhile investing more in, we can spend this much and we can ship an MVP, and we're going to probably only ship half of these features that you want, but it'll be the key ones that really matter. And so you can actually start having much more effective conversations by just discussing date ranges instead of specific dates. But the principle that you need to make clear is make those unknown unknowns more quantifiable, or create better conversations around the inherent uncertainty in building software. This isn't project planning. We don't know every single thing that needs to happen. There's thousands of uncertainties and stuff baked into every deadline or commitment that us or developers give. And you need to make those things clear, because those are business risks that you need to have conversations around. It's not just about hitting a deadline and making sure this invisible house is built to spec, because it just never happens.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. But I mean, all of these things are the things that we've tried to do. But, like I said, he just does not understand how it works. In fact, he will tell you, if you don't give me a date, then it means shall not give. He just keeps pressing on the date. And if you are not giving him that date, he's just not leaving you alone to focus. So, I mean, how do you now try to do that? Because if you eventually you are pushed to the work and you then give a date, and that date comes, and of course, it's possible that it's not ready then. And then you are being looked at as someone who does not understand what he's doing and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's the situation.
Yeah, look, I hear that, and working for dicks is working for dicks. I like it. Some people are just going to be pricks, and there's nothing you can really do about that. I've definitely worked for enough of those people in my life. Luckily, I work for less and less over time. But sometimes people just don't get it. And what you need to do is show, like, you need to try and show these are the consequences of it. And when they're like, no, go ahead and do that anyway, you're like, okay, well, you made this decision. This is the compromise you're making. That when something comes up and they're like, why did you make it go wrong? You're like, no, well, I didn't. You chose this compromise, and this was the result of your choice. So it's about helping make those unknowns visible, and then making it explicit that when they make a choice, they're accepting all of these things. Or when they say, we can't shuffle the deadline, we have to ship it. Okay, if we ship it, there's a good chance that these things are going to break because we're not testing it properly. Like, are you happy that we ship it without testing it properly? And then when you ship it and it breaks, he's like, oh, why didn't you do your job properly? You're like, no, you explicitly chose not to test it properly. You wanted to ship it sooner. So it's like, how do you make those things an explicit decision and the consequences of those decisions more explicit for the non-technical person, because they don't, you know it inherently, but they just don't.
It's okay. Hopefully when we get there, we don't get into a fight. Well, thank you so much. That's helpful.
It's very difficult to build software for people who don't understand software. And it will always be.
Extremely difficult. It's okay. We'll get by. Thank you so much, Roger.
Cool, pleasure. I don't know if I really helped, but
yeah, he did. I mean, he did.
Cool. All right, everybody. I know we've hit time. I do follow in the questions channel or the learning resources channel. If you have specific requests, anything that I've mentioned today, feel free to tag me in it. I'm just at Roger in the group. Otherwise, we do this every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, it's me, and every other week is an interview prep. So all of those, how do I get my first PM job, or how do I land this interview? Next week, Tuesday, there's a session just for you on that. It's not always me doing these group mentorship sessions. We're trying to get some other people in as well. But yeah, thanks for hanging out.
All right, thank you, Roger.
Sure thing. Fortune or Princess, any other announcements or anything you want to throw out there?
No, that's all. That's cool. Thank you.
All right, bye,
Thank you.
Roger.
Sorry. We have Hangouts, so please. I've made the announcements on the Slack channel. So we are doing our Hangouts in 7 cities this time around for this quarter. So please check the general channel of Slack for more information. Okay.
I'm gonna have to chat to you about a Cape Town hangout.
Yeah, Roger, we should do something.
Hi, BJ.
Hi.
There's no hangout to worry.
Yeah, so I saw on the PP, I saw the location, right, and then the entire northeast, northwest was actually edged out of the entire space. I don't know why.
Mustafa, did you see our announcements? We kept the announcement up for almost a month. We were trying to.
I don't think I saw that. Yeah, maybe that's where the issue came from.
To host in their cities, but nobody from the north, obviously.
Wow.
So just speak to Bridget. Send Bridget a message on Slack.
Okay.
Send me a message. Let's do something in your city.
Don't worry. I don't know who the person is. Can send Bridget a message on Slack, and then we can take it up from there.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
Yeah, Roger.
And Roger,
Cape Town, cute too.
Let's do it. Not this time, but let's do it.
Okay.
Cool. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ask questions in the questions channel.
Thank you, Roger.
Hope that was useful and I didn't dodge too many questions. I'm normally pretty good at that. Bridget, you still there?
Bridget has left the call. Actually.
Bridget's left. Okay, cool. I'm just going to message Akeem. I'll set up a call with him directly.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much, Roger. Thank you, everyone. The call is over, so I would just run everything up from my end now.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.